Hello, welcome to another TSN Sandbox Game Master Guide. In this video I'm going to take a look at the ship spawn menu. If you've seen one of the older videos, it's going to be very similar. There's been a couple of updates since the older video with some of the systems changing slightly. On the left side I select the ship spawn menu using this button here, which is SPWN. And that brings up everything that I can spawn, all the different stations and ships that I can spawn in game at this point in time. You have the clear option at the top to be able to go back. You can also select another menu just by clicking on it, and it will automatically switch to that menu. If you know how to use the basic menu system and have seen that video, then you'll already know this. A couple of indicators first. So at the very top there is this button that says side value and the actual number next to it. These are just indicators that tell you what the side value is of the ship or group of ships that you're going to spawn at any one point. This can be set using this change button. It is also automatically set when you choose a particular race, and then you can change after that. So for example, if I chose a TSN, the side value is going to automatically update to the player side, which is by default is side 2. That will mean anything selected now from these TSN menu will spawn as an allied ship when the player looks at it. I could go to the Hegemony Menu and that side value would change to the default enemy side value, which is side value 1. Or I could select pirates and it will give me a different side value altogether, side value 5. Side values have a particular role in that if you have ships on side value 1 and then some other ships on value 2, they'll be enemies towards each other, so it affects the AI and how they interact with each other. If you have ships then on side value 5, they'll all be enemies to each other. So if you had side value 1, 3 and 5 for example, those will all be enemies and they'll treat each other as enemies and attack as needed. It means that you can set up interesting situations in the sandbox where there is a Krellian force that is attacked by a pirate force using the different side values, so it does create some interesting mission options. I'm just going to clear this menu and go back to the very basic one. Now we have all the different factions within the TSN Sandbox. Some of these factions are just straight from the Artemis game. Some include ones that have been added using the TSN mod that we have, where we've added extra ships in. I'm going to go through each faction so that you can have a look at the menus. I'm also going to talk about this last one, which is called static objects, and what that is, because originally it was called bases, and now what I've done is I've wrapped it into things called static objects, and there's several different things in there now. So we'll make a start. TSN and USFP are obviously allied to the player side, so it automatically sets the side value 1. If I wanted to spawn them as enemies, I could just change that side value and then it'll spawn them as side value 3 instead. But I'm going to keep them as allied to the player for the time being. You have 3 drop down menus above: TSN fleets, TSN ships and TSN assets. In the fleets you can see there is a support fleet. These are auxiliary vessels which players can move to and interact with to be able to get new supplies of torpedoes and other ordnance. The same goes with the Jinn supply fleet and the Goblin supply fleet. Then there are 3 groups: a light group, medium group and heavy group, and these just spawn different ship types. So a light group is a couple of scouts and a Artemis class cruiser. Obviously the heavy group has much heavier TSN ships in there. It has your dreadnought and it's got a few it's usually a random mix, so if I for example spawned a different heavy group, it should give me a different mix of ships. Okay, in TSN ships, these are all the individual ships that you can spawn. So everything from the player scout all the way through to the smaller fighters and bombers that you get. There's also these ships, which is the Ares, Valkyrie, Apollo and Nemesis, Chimera and Allegiance class. Those are mod ships that have been added using the TSN mod. Finally, TSN assets are things like the shipyards, weapons platforms, sensor buoys and comms relays. They're points of interest basically that players can move to or have to defend. So if I spawn a weapons platform, that provides a weapons platform that will defend a particular area. It's got B marks on it and those will fire and defend against incoming enemies. The TSN assets are usually things, or in all the menus, they're usually things that do not move. Okay, I'm going to clear those out and we'll have a look at the next menu. Just going to have to delete the grant manually. There we go. Next, we've got the USFP. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to run through them instead of spawning them all, and I'll detail particular bits that come up. So the USFP menu, as I said, side value switches automatically to display side value. You've got civilian ships. These are all the ones without any kind of offensive capabilities. So you've got your science vessels, liners, an extra couple of transports and other civilian traffic that you might get moving about the area. The military ones are ones that will have an offensive capability, so there's a patrol boat and corvette, again extra ships that have been added through the mod, and they have the ability to attack other ships, and then your classic escort and destroyer. USFP fleets allows for fleets of interest, so cargo convoys, mining convoys, just things that you could have in a mission that are moving across an area that need defending and that need escorting, or just to add a little bit more traffic. Finally, there's USFP assets. Again, these are all the static object, so you've got your sensor buoy and comms relay, you've got your bases, and they're all kind of centered around just general USFP bases. You've got your factories, and you do have a weapons platform as well there as well if you want to defend. Moving on to Zimny. When it comes to these kind of menus, I've separated them into being able to spawn a single ship. So those are the Zimny ships from the game, and there's also a light group. I might go ahead and expand a few more. We were experimenting with making Zimny NPC ships, so I was looking at expanding them more into groups that you could take on as enemies if you wanted. Again, these are side value 2, but if I wanted to spawn them as an enemy, I could switch to side value 1 and have them allied with the Hegemony forces, for example. Jordan, again, are another allied race. You've got the single Jordan, which is just spawning a single ship. You've got fleets, so you can spawn a small fleet of ships, as you can see. And then assets are just the Jordan base, and the text and the actual visuals as well change because it's a specific base that was created for the mod. I'm just going to remove those again quickly. Alright, next up we have Hegemony. Hegemony have all your usual forces, so you've got the fleets, you've got the single, and then you've got the Hegemony assets. The fleets, I've got race-specific fleets, including Scaran fleets, where there'll be 2 or 3 Scarans spawned together. They make for a very, very challenging target. There's Arvonian fleets, again, will just be Arvonians. Torgoth fleets are just Torgoths, and Krelian fleets are just Krelians. There's mixed fleets, so you can have different types of mixed fleets. There are carrier fleets, so that includes Arvonians and other Hegemony in there, like your Krelians and your Torgoths. You have command fleets, which are very, very heavy ships to try and take on. A single Torgoth command can take quite a lot of damage, so you need to attack it with a couple of player ships. And then finally some convoys for interest, so you have Krelian transports moving through the area, escorted by a couple of Krelians, and they're organised into small fleets. These are all the single Hegemony vessels, including the Krelian drone cruiser, and your transport and command ships are in there as well. And then finally, the Hegemony Assets gives you all the different types of bases. The sensor buoy, active and inactive. If you spawn one that is active, it automatically reduces the sensor range of players on their science screen and their captain's map. If you do one that's inactive, it spawns one that doesn't reduce the sensor range automatically, but the GM can go in and manually do that. The USF, we've got the single USF ships, very heavy ships and difficult to overcome for just one ship. And then you've got the fleets. The heavy fleet requires coordination of a few player ships to be able to take out. There's Natani, an alien race. They're on side 4. Again, you've got the single Natani ships, the Natani fleets, and finally the Natani asset, which is just a base at this point. The pirates. The Skull Pirates are the pirates in the base Artemis game, which we've added in there. The Euphini Pirates are our own race of pirates. These were added before the Skull Pirates came in, and are still part of our mod. And then finally we've got the Asteroid base, which is a pirate asset. Caltrons are like a mechanical race, which are challenging to overcome if there's lots spawned. You've got primary variation B, that's like a fighter, and then you've got the primary all the way to a super swarm. The swarms and the super swarms are very challenging to take on, the command ships. And then you've got different size groups or fleets, so you've got scout group, battle group, and invasion fleet. Finally, the biomechs were included, so you've got the 4 different stages of biomechs. When you spawn one of these fleets, if you spawn the same fleet, because there are only, for example, 3 different ones to choose from, if you spawn a light fleet, it draws from a list of what it could be. So when you and then randomly chooses what ships will go into it. So if you spawn 2 light fleets, they shouldn't be identical. You can see here we've got cruisers, 3 cruisers, 1 dreadnought and 1 leviathan, whereas here we've got 2 cruisers, 2 battleships and a Goliath. So each time they're spawned, the fleet composition can be slightly different. I'm just going to remove those enemy fleets so they don't cause any damage. Okay. Final menu is static objects. These just give you a couple of extra things that you can add in. They used to be in the points of interest and assets, but I put them into the spawn menu and made it more of a generic spawn menu. There's life pods that you can spawn, which will automatically number as you spawn them. There's also the black box that you can spawn. So it gives points of interest for ships to go and pick up. So the black box, you can see you've got black box 1, black box 2, and you've got life pod 1 and 2. The shuttles that the players launch can interact with these and pick them up as part of the mission story that you've got going through. Okay. Let's have a look. What else do I want to go through? Yes, when you spawn an enemy fleet, you'll notice, if I zoom in here, when they first spawn, every single name is 2 dashes, and then the names are assigned. When you spawn an enemy fleet, you've got to leave a small gap between spawning the next enemy fleet. You can see they all were named. That's just so that the sequence of naming can go through and you end up with them all named as the correct thing. And then when I spawn my next enemy fleet, it will increment the names, so now we're on L instead of K. And then when you spawn the next enemy fleet, it will switch to M. If you spawn 2 in quick succession, so for example, if I spawn a light fleet and then, if I can do it, another light fleet, no, I didn't do it quick enough. If you spawn 2 in quick succession, they will both be named as N, and it means that they will clump up into one big fleet instead of being 2 separate fleets. See if I can do one quick enough. 1, 2. There we go. So I spawned 2 fleets there, and they all are named as the same designation, which is not what I wanted. I wanted them to be separate enemy fleets. It has implications for when you move on to your AI menu and you want to try and control those enemy fleets. If there are 2 fleets with the same designation, with the same letter designation, you're not going to be able to control them individually. And it has happened where we've had say a fleet up in grid Bravo 1 and a fleet down in grid Delta 1 with the same designation. Larger fleets take a little bit longer for the names to be assigned, and if you end up with those 2 designations, you're not going to be able to, you're going to have to delete a fleet and respawn it. So that's just something to be mindful of. Anyway, that's it for the ship spawn menu. Keep an eye out for other Game Master guides for the TSN Sandbox, and thanks for listening.